Welcome to the Sour Go-to-Market SaaS Takes podcast, where all your favorite SaaS leaders spill their controversial opinions while testing their taste buds. Get ready for sour candy with even sweeter insights.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Jason Hassenberg, and you're tuning into the Sour Go-to-Market SaaS Takes podcast, the show with sour takes and even sour candies. Today, I'm joined by Nate Branscome. Nate, thank you so much for joining today. Nate is a go-to-market and sales leader at HockeyStack. HockeyStack is a go-to-market analytics platform helping marketers and sales team measure, forecast, predict, and grow revenue by combining attribution, lift analysis, and marketing mix modeling all into one. Nate, thank you so much for joining today. Do you have anything to say before we take the sour plunge?
No, I respect the intro. That was good. It was a good pitch, but no, appreciate you having me. We mentioned this before the call, but yeah, I respect your hustle. I think what you built in the community, and personal brand is super impressive. So yeah, excited to see what you do over time, but also, yeah, let's eat some candies.
Thanks, man. So I love the sour takes you sent over. I'm sure everyone who's going to be watching and on LinkedIn are going to love them too. Let's dive into the first sour take. Our sour candies we're going to be trying today are sour Skittles, the sour popping candy by Warheads. We're going to have Cry Baby Tears. Looks like a tear.
I don't know that one. Oh, this one. Okay.
Yep. Then we're going to do Barnett's Mega Sour Candy. This is the one that everyone's been really getting the sour faces from. And then we're going to wrap it up with Toxic Waste Nuclear Fusion.
Nice. Let's do it.
Here we go. Sour Skittles number one.
Nice. Should we tell them the sour Skittles story?
Would you say?
Should we tell them the sour Skittles story?
Sour Skittles starting number one. Nate, you sent over 5 sour takes. This one I love especially. Cold calling is rarely an efficient prospecting channel. This goes against what a lot of people are saying right now. Get on the phones, hit the phones hard. So I want to hear your take. Why is it rarely efficient?
Yeah, that's why I said rarely efficient, because I was scared people might come after me if I talk shit about cold calling. But Jason, do you pick up random numbers?
I really don't. Rarely.
I don't either. I don't know anyone else that does, so that's where it's coming from, I guess. I think I pick up my wife's calls, but even I screen some of my friends. I screen my mom, so sorry, mom, but I think it's if people aren't picking up the phone, then you don't get at bat. So I guess with some tech, some sales leaders are maybe more apt to pick up the phone, but I think in most industries, it's not super efficient. And yeah, there's better ways to reach. I think cold outbound as a whole is going to get like a lot less efficient. So some things that might stand out are like the human factor. So obviously with all the AI stuff coming out, I think just being human will help out. And I think a lot of stuff will also move to like signal-based selling. So just doing really great marketing, getting people to engage, and then being able to have visibility to that engagement and reaching out at a relevant time with relevant messaging and things like that. So, and then obviously what you're doing, like LinkedIn and personal brands. So being able to get a message out to many people without actually calling them or putting an email in their inbox or something like that. So you're obviously killing it at that part, but yeah. What do you think?
It's funny you say that because I think there's like when I've done cold calling in the past, there's like a stance where it's like, okay, let's just cold call hours a day. And then there's people who are like way against it. Let's not cold call at all. We're doing strictly LinkedIn outbound. My question for you is there like a 50 mix? Do you do any cold calling at all? If you don't, that's completely fine. I just want to kind of hear the HockeyStack mix since you guys are doing so well right now, growing exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do any currently right now. And obviously, like, I used to do it when I was an SDR, a few years ago. So I think there was a time where it worked really well. But now I think just people prefer other channels. There's getting a lot more spam. People just like aren't picking up the phone. So
Yeah.
I think there's just more efficient ways of doing things. For us personally, like obviously, we're huge on marketing and getting things out at a broad perspective. And then we do what I mentioned, a lot of signal-based selling, where once people start to interact with the stuff that we're putting out and hitting our website and checking out our interactive demo, which I think is also really important as well, as like having access to the product.
Yeah.
Then we can reach out with, more relevant messaging and relevant timing and know who to reach out to and that type of thing. So that's really what we've been focused on, is driving as much engagement as possible and then reaching out to those companies that are already engaging versus trying to get people, completely ice cold.
Yeah. And I would love to dive into one of the factors that you said was like, you don't pick up the phone, right? Let's say someone calls you, cold calls you, you don't pick up the phone, all of a sudden you get a voicemail. Are you listening to that voicemail? Are you just letting it go and deleting it? And like, what's your opinion on leaving a voicemail if you are cold calling?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have like I think whatever works, for different people, different things are going to work. I
Yeah.
think the benefit of obviously having a voicemail is I probably would check it and like at least look at the transcription. I probably would listen to it.
Yeah.
And then I would probably just delete it regardless of how important it was. But I know a lot of people like direct to an email at that point. So, maybe I'd be more likely to like open the email, but I guess the direct effect of the cold call wouldn't actually get the beating, but maybe it could, help out. But I think another argument to that would be like, is it super efficient? And is there a better way of spending your time? Because obviously, I mean, this now too, time is, the hardest. It's very limited and you have to do a bunch of different stuff. So, how do you want to distribute your time? And is that the most effective way to do so? So, but yeah, I mean, every product's different. If you're successful in it, I'm not hating on it. Keep doing it, but I don't see it anymore. So.
And when you say you don't see it anymore, is that more of a consumer change or is that more of just like, or a buyer change?
Yeah, I think it's all about like reaching out to the buyers in the way that they prefer. And like, I mean, obviously us two talked about it. Like, we don't prefer to get random numbers.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll pick up a random number because they have the area code and I'm expecting a call, and then it actually ends up turning me off and kind of like annoys me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
now I'm not fond of this company. So, yeah, I think it's just about like understanding how people like to receive information. And I think that has changed,
Yeah.
especially recently as people go more digital and online. So.
Have you done any like community engagement, and have you seen that work for you in HockeyStack?
Yeah, HockeyStack as a whole definitely has been involved in like communities, and we're obviously like talking to a lot of marketing leaders in there. For me specifically, like I would love to be more involved with that, but it's more of just a time like
Yeah.
bandwidth issue. But I do think that's super strong and similar to like LinkedIn and personal brand, where you're basically able to connect with people at a more personal level, and also in some cases like a more one-to-many scenario. So, but yeah, I would pick that, or like a LinkedIn message or a Slack message within a community, or like an introduction from someone in the community, anytime over that. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's impressive about what you built as well, is you kind of like built your own community here, so you can like reach out to these different leaders and get introductions and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be a lot more efficient for you in the long run versus just knocking out 100 calls a day to people that don't even know who you are. So.
That's a good point. And there's something about like when you receive a cold call versus a cold LinkedIn DM, you're almost a little bit more just like, okay, at least they're trying on LinkedIn. Like they're on LinkedIn. A DM isn't coming right to my like phone immediately, and you're almost giving them a little bit of slack where it's like cold call. For me, if someone cold calls me, they have to have something within, 20 seconds in order for me to be like, yeah, this makes sense, right? Because then it's just a waste of time. Whereas LinkedIn DM, it's like, okay, maybe I don't even look at their DM until a week later when it's on my time. And, I'm Sunday, I'm watching football and I'm like, all right, I'm going to look through the DMs that I haven't looked through, right? And then you see it and you're like, okay, cool. But it didn't waste your time that you're actually trying to use for other acts towards, getting revenue through the door, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just more likely to give you that bad as well. Because if you knock out 100 cold calls, I don't know what the average connect rate is, but I assume it's pretty low. But yeah, I mean, more people are going to likely even read that message versus totally ignore the call. So even worst case, if they don't respond to the message, maybe the message is good and they remember it and it's relevant for them and they check you out down the road or something like that. So yeah, I think it's just all about trying to provide like the best experience throughout the
Yeah.
whole buyer journey, including during prospecting. And yeah, like you mentioned, people are strapped for time, so letting them answer on their own time or take a look at their own time, I think is ideal. But yeah,
If you were
no hate
rolling
on cold
out,
calling though.
If you were rolling out like a go-to-market strategy right now, and let's just go back maybe a year when HockeyStack wasn't as big as it was, and maybe you were having to do some outbound. And let's just say you're taking over a new SaaS company, right? And you're rolling, and it's a startup, and they're scrappy. How would you set that up to be successful, to go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we've seen success-wise is even just like organic LinkedIn. So if you have like a strong team that's posting about relevant information to the audience, that you're looking to educate or sell to or whatever it is, that was the biggest thing for us. So obviously, even when I first started like 6 or 7 months ago, everyone was saying, "Hey, I heard about you on LinkedIn. I heard about you on LinkedIn. I heard about you on LinkedIn." I was new, so I was still like outbound prospecting, and I would get an occasional opportunity, but it's nothing like the reach that you can get when you're providing really good like posts and content, especially from like the executive team, which I typically have a lot more credibility. So if you're able to educate the market and talk about interesting things, or really have like creative ideas and original thoughts, then I think that's the absolute best way to go about it.
Okay.
But then when you're pairing that with LinkedIn messaging, and community, and especially network, hey, like we brought on like really strong advisors, and I know you interviewed like Jared, so he's one of our advisors. So
Yeah.
just like getting in with the right people. And then also what the executive team did before I even started there was interview, just almost similar to you, like just reaching out to a ton of these different marketing leaders and understanding what the challenge is with their day-to-day currently, and like how can we shift the product roadmap and what we're solving for to actually apply to like the commonalities that they heard across like hundreds of marketing leaders. So yeah, that would be my thought. And then obviously supplementing it with, cold outbound as well is going to help out. And then like what I mentioned earlier, a lot of the signal based stuff, because once you start getting a lot of like awareness on LinkedIn, people are going to check out your website. And then obviously like HockeyStack does this, but there's other tools that do it as well. You can start seeing who's engaging with your stuff, who's liking stuff on LinkedIn, but also who's checking out, your website, how often, how many different people at these accounts are checking out the website. So once you start getting insights like that, it makes it a little easier of who to reach out to. And it's not necessarily cold anymore once you start generating that awareness, because they know who you are and they've seen posts and stuff like that. So
Yeah, the intent's been a big topic for a lot of organizations. I've been seeing webinars left and right about signal, and signals, and buyer intents, and what's your, it was a small take, but what's your take on intents? And I know some people are like, okay, if they change jobs, that's a really good intent to use. So, like, are there good use cases out there for companies to get involved in?
yeah, so I mean, I think we can get access to a lot more data now than previously. So yeah, obviously if someone changes the job, you can reach out to them, but it's not like really a super strong signal, I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're tracking like how people are engaging with, so for us, like we have interactive demo, for example. So if we're able to see someone from an account checked out our interactive demo, and then another person checked out our pricing page, another person read our blog, another person watched the video on the flow, that's like information that we can then take and then reach out to them and know, they're at least like checking us out. They know who we are. So the messaging we're sending is going to be relevant. And
Yep.
then not only that, we can also tie the messaging specifically to what they're doing. So, hey, Bob, saw you're checking out the interactive demo. Do you have any questions? And you can multi-thread to Susan. Hey, saw you, we're checking out this blog the other day. So yeah, I think that's kind of the path forward. And there's more companies that are giving you, access to that type of data. And then it also gets sales and marketing aligned. So marketers can focus on, hey, here's the accounts that, we're starting to see traction with. So we're going to hit them with, more ads and basically nurture them. But at the same time, like SDRs can reach out and everyone's on the same page with what's going on. It has like full visibility into what's going on as well. So, but yeah, I think that's where things are shifting from cold outbound not being successful anymore to figuring out how do we find the people that are looking into us, and how do we provide some type of like value or communication that's going to get them over the line to actually like chat with us.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this whole intent and data play right here and what we're talking about leads us into our sour take number 2. So, Nate, with that being said, sour take number 1 closed. We're going to sour take number 2. We're going to be trying the sour popping candy by Warheads. I'm going to rip this open, and then I'm going to read it, and we're going to go right away. This is
Cool.
like pop rock, so it should remind
I
you.
never had the popping version.
Yeah, this is dope. So I love it. So here we go.
All right, let's do it.
Organizations who claim they are data backed are rarely data backed. I'll let you take a stab at
Oh,
this right away.
popping. I
Oh,
wonder
I
if it's
love
picking up in the microphone. Tastes good though. Um, yeah, so I think there's a lot of different examples. Like one, so obviously we, are working with a lot of teams doing marketing analytics and attribution. So what we see is even with like the most talented and the biggest and the largest enterprise orgs, where you're like, oh, they have everything figured out. They for sure are making decisions based on the correct data. For us, like most companies that we talk to are using a single touch attribution model, which basically means they're making all their decisions off the last thing a prospect does before they turn into a deal or close one deal or something like that. So um, I've seen that really like every company I've sold to is where, you get these great logos coming in. You're like, oh, awesome. They probably have everything figured out. Like, this is going to be great. And then you get in and, it's not always that way. And sometimes even with enterprise, if they're bigger, there's more red tape. So it's harder for them to kind of get up to speed with the data because they have things already set up and they are the way they are and that type of thing. So, so these companies are making decisions based off data, but it's very like limited data and they're making like huge decisions off of it. So like another example is like, how are we going to decide what quota is for the sales team? Well, let's make a data backed decision. And sometimes that decision is, well, what's the revenue goal? How many AEs do we have? All right, let's divide it up. Or like in the golden era of SaaS, when everyone was like hiring 50 SDRs, okay, how do we grow sales? Well, each SDR can, book this many meetings, AE's close rate or this. Here's all this data we have. So if we hire 50 SDRs, it's going to, grow our sales. Or like gifting platforms, right? So
Yeah.
all these deals, any deal that hits stage 4, we're sending them Grove cookies. And all the close rate is crazy high. Like we should send Grove cookies to everyone, which I support as well. But did they actually close because the cookies, or did they close because they were already late stage? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's kind of like interesting when you actually narrow down into like how you're actually making decisions, what data are you actually using, and what's the measurement method.
Yeah.
Is it actually like an actionable insight that has like a statistical basis, or is it more like, hey, we saw this and now we're trying this and now we're data driven? So yeah, I mean, I think it can be like, it's not always as strong, obviously, if you're using like a limited data set or the wrong data set, or you're measuring things the wrong way. Is it just a coincidence, or is it actually significant insight that you can actually act on? So I think it's important just not only getting as much data as possible, but also like thinking about how you're analyzing it and getting insights from it. So, and yeah, I think we're already seeing like a big shift in this. It's no longer just like about these platforms that get you all the data, and then you have like someone on your team that's analyzing the data and making decisions. I think like these orgs are really starting to move in tools into like, how can we surface the insights or the takeaways from this data set for, the org, so that way they can make actions instead of worry about like getting all their data in a row and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point. Because like I'm thinking about the people who are watching this, and it's probably gonna be marketers and founders and revenue leaders, but especially for the marketers and founders who they're probably sitting in their seat like, oh, I thought we were data backed, right? Like, oh, it's like I thought we were data backed. How can they like check their company system and processes and operations to be like, oh yeah, we are data backed, or oh shit, we're actually not data backed? Are there like or is there a blurred line there? For people who are watching, how can you help them discover whether or not they're data backed?
yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a gray line, and there's always room to, do it in a better way, basically. But
Yeah.
I think it's mostly just about like awareness of like, if you're going to make a huge decision, like what data are we actually using that drives the decision? And like, let's actually think about, what we're deriving from the data and if we should like really scale this out. And then
Yeah.
there's obviously other ways where it's like, we have intuition and like the data shows this, but maybe it's not 100%. We should go all in. So you can test that out for like a region or a product line or something like that as well. So I think it's just about being aware that it's probably an issue and there's a better way to do things, and then digging deep into why decisions are made, and even tracking like the progress. If you make a big decision, track how that goes. If it goes bad, try to figure out where the flaw was within that, with that decision and how it was made. So, yeah, I feel like that's pretty much all you can do. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
always going to go. There's always room to, I think, in data analysis to basically get stronger insights or make decisions better, just depending off the data set that you have, obviously. So
For the things that most people wouldn't think are trackable. And I can't come up with a great example right now. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's sending a letter or something. I don't know but the fact being is, for things that are untrackable, for a lot of people who they think are untrackable, what I'm noticing from the series that HockeyStack's running is that a lot of them are trackable if you actually put data points behind it. And so is there an example behind something that most people would be like, oh, this is not attractable, this is not trackable, where it actually is trackable?
Um, yeah, I guess that's like a loaded question, but there's certain like models that you can do that even track like things that are 100% untrackable. So,
Yeah.
for example, like if I don't know, like a lot of teams we talk to like are going to events and they're having like these private conversations. There's no way to like log that to Salesforce and have it trackable or anything like that. But there
Yeah.
are different like modeling methods where if you have enough data, it can look at basically all the changes that are going on and kind of figure out, you know, hey, this might actually be having an effect, down funnel. But as far as like other things, I mean, obviously we're doing marketing analytics. So a lot of people don't know that like being able to track like LinkedIn ad impressions is trackable. So we have tons of teams that are, saying, hey, LinkedIn is driving no revenue and we're putting a bunch of budget and like putting these ads on LinkedIn and we're not seeing like any actual results from it. But what we found out pretty much across all our customers is LinkedIn is more like a brand awareness channel. So they're going to see your ads over time.
Yeah.
They might click on an ad, check something out, but they're not going to convert and fill out a form. They're going to leave. Then they're going to Slack somebody and they're going to talk about it on a meeting next week. And then some random intern or someone that was in the meeting is in charge of like starting the evaluation and they fill out a form. So I think it's just about like trying to understand how buyers actually make decisions and like start these processes and then obviously track as much as possible. But I don't think you can ever get to like 100% being able to track every activity and understanding like the impact and getting insights out of it. But obviously, like the closer you can get to there, the more educated the decisions you can make. And if you know it's a channel or it's something that's going to be a lot harder to track, then like we were talking about earlier, just make sure that goes into the decision making process and be like, this is the data we have. Like we think this is a good decision. We can't fully know that, so maybe like we can do a smaller scale experiment or try it out with a region or something like that. So
Yeah. When for the customers that do close, do you ask them like, "Hey, like, where did you initially like find out about us?" Is there any questions there that you have like your team take note of and try to collect some data points to be able to actually like pinpoint where they came?
yeah, for sure. So I mean, we combine a bunch of different ways to collect data. So like self-reported attribution is obviously super important. So you're asking them, hey, where'd you hear about us? What's interesting is like a lot of the times it's wrong. So if you hear about a brand for a couple of years and someone asks you where you heard about it, you might think of a particular time, but was that actually the first time, or was that just the most meaningful, or was that just the most recent, or whatever it is? So it's more just getting like their perception of where they felt like they heard about you, even if it's not necessarily true. But then there's other way you want to combine that more like qualitative data, and you can obviously like group it together. So if someone writes LinkedIn and LinkedIn posts or your post, like you can start getting data and grouping it in. But then you can also measure like the digital footprint and like these different touch points that they're going through like digitally, and be able to like look at attribution. But then there's also we can look at like what you mentioned earlier on the call, but we can do like a lift analysis. So if people go through this touch point, what's the incremental impact, that they're going to convert over like our baseline or something like that. So I think that's kind of my point, is that you should gather as much data as you can. And
Yeah.
even if it's not something that you can like actually report on, but even like self-reported attribution, if you can just capture those and just understand at like a subjective level what's going on and what you're starting to hear and stuff like that, then that's huge as well. Because like even for HockeyStack, like I mentioned, everyone was saying, hey, we heard about you on LinkedIn. We can't track like if someone sees our organic post on LinkedIn, we can track ads and stuff like that. But when we started out, it was mostly like organic social. So we can see if people click from LinkedIn and stuff like that, but that's not typically what actually happens. So
Yep.
so we weighted self-attribution higher for that data point because we knew we didn't have other data that could actually, track what's going on there. So
How do companies who, and I'm just speaking out of experience, but a CEO who kind of just like makes decisions, he's like, we're doing this, like I've had, we all have founders and CEOs who are just like, more uppers or who are trying to push an initiative who really don't have any data behind it, and maybe you're in the seat where you're like, I have the data, I know what we could actually do. How are you able to actually talk to the founder like, I love the idea that you have, but here's the data we have to actually go off of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly what you said. Like, make sure you have data. You're coming to them, suggesting why you think maybe we shouldn't go all in at this scale, and like, yeah, we can experiment with your idea. But also, I think it's also obviously important to bring your own take. So if you're just saying, hey, this is not gonna work, or hey, this is not gonna work, and here's data to show that, they'll be okay. Well, you have a better idea that we should do? So I think just making sure you bring like alternatives that are data backed, and then say, hey, like, we're happy to try this out, but let's not like, put all our designers on building this new product that we don't
Yep.
know, has product market fit. Let's, interview some customers first and figure out if people actually have a need for it or whatever it is, and kind of take it more steps. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think some founders definitely do think that way, and that's the reason they've seen success so far is they're taking these big bets, and some of them are based off intuition, obviously, especially early on. But yeah, I think it's always important to check a founder or anyone really on like, again, what we were talking about earlier, like, why was the decision made? What information do we have to say this is going to be successful? And is there other alternatives or ways we can like scale down and kind of phase it out versus like going all in from the get-go?
SaaS companies want to run so fast, right? They want to grow as fast as possible. And I know we're starting to see where it's like, okay, we need to have steady growth. We need to be efficient. I think that's where data comes in, right? And that's why data has become so important, is because companies realize now that they just can't add 50, SDRs to the mix and think that it's going to grow revenue, right? And so I see the importance of data continuing. And I know you touched on this earlier where it was like, okay, company used to just give you data, then you would have to like break down what does it mean. But now a lot of these companies like HockeyStack, they're actually breaking down this data for you and telling you what it means. And where do you see that going years from now? Is there a step further that could be taken?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still have a lot of room to get to that step. I think like Gong's another example that does really good at this, and they're obviously kind of the early, I think, thought leaders of like going in this direction where they're saying, that I think it was Gong Labs or something where they're putting out all these statistics based on like customer data and stuff like that. So, you need X amount of decision makers involved in X amount of Zoom meetings to close a deal. But if you have too many, then there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and then it ends up actually going down. So, I think maybe that's like the intermission step, is where these vendors start analyzing like all their customer data and then providing like reports. And that's something we're focusing on as well, with something we're calling it HockeyStack Labs. So probably looking up to Gong for that. But yeah, I think the next iteration is obviously just having, whether it's AI or machine learning models, or, the tech basically telling you like, hey, this is the data set we have. This is going to be the most impactful decisions you can make from the data set. And then teams, like we just talked about, it's not all about growth, it's about efficiency. So, the team can spend more time solving problems versus like, how do we gather data and analyze it and figure out, what we should actually do, which is the majority of the workload today, to, hey, here's 10 things you can do to make a big change on the existing quarter, today. And I think that's where the gap is currently. As far as how it goes, I mean, I guess it could make the decisions for you. So if you could execute a decision without having like as much, I don't know, like human approval or analysis, I guess that would be like the next step. But I think we're pretty far off from that. So I think it's more about just making humans and employees more efficient.
I like the idea of like it being able to give you 10, right? 10 initiatives, and then you can kind of dissect them on your own, because I think there always needs to be some sort of human approval. And I just love the fact that you're looking at Gong, right? And you're thinking, okay, they have their finger on the pulse. They're doing some sort of, some customer insights that are right. And I think, like you're saying, you're spinning off your own sort of HockeyStack Labs. I think that's what you called it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I really love your take on here, and just brings us to our sour take number 3. Nate, how are you feeling so far?
Oh, I'm good. It's cakewalk.
Let's go. Crybaby Tears number 3. I'm gonna do all 4. Totally up to you.
Oh, I only got 3.
Do you only have 3?
You gave me the light pack, man. Unless my
All
wife
right.
made one of these two.
All right, we'll do 3 then.
You can do
Most
4.
people that claim they grew the company from X to X for credibility's sake, that growth would never have happened, or would have happened with or without them.
We get
Now,
attacked for this one too.
I see everybody, like, now I'm trying to hire some people. I see on everybody's resume, oh, I worked at blank and blank. They were at $1 million. Now they're at 100 million ARR. I was a champion there. And I'm like, this is such a load of shit, right? See it on LinkedIn all the time. All the posts are people are patting themselves on the back, which I hate. Those are probably the worst posts I've ever seen. And so this fires me up, Nate. And I'm
Nice.
happy you're calling this out. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the support. Now they'll come for us both, but yeah, I mean, I've been an early stage AE at 3 different companies now, and I've never, never gotten to that degree of like 0 to 100 million, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think anyone that's been in a similar position and anyone that hasn't knows it takes like a team to do that. So,
Yeah.
I think the company grew X to X while you were there. Not I grew the company X to X when there was 500 other people, at the company or whatever it is. So, and yeah, I think a lot of times it's like credibility to sell courses or whatever it is, which I get, but obviously it doesn't really feel right, especially for people that are green and spending hard-earned money and like seeing this as a way to like really up their game. And
Yeah.
obviously it can be helpful, but I think it's just, I don't know, be truthful about it. I feel like it almost discredits you as well, because in my opinion, like a leader would be very like we focus, like we built this team and like we did this together and
Yeah.
it was really like impressive, and I stand by my team and the people I hired and stuff like that, like they really made it happen. And that's, I think, a huge leadership quality, is taking blame when something goes bad and giving credit when things go well.
Yeah.
And even if you have the biggest contribution on the team, I mean, that's a great opportunity to step up and then kind of share the wealth, I guess. So yeah, no, I get the reasoning behind it. I get why people do it, but I think it actually, like you mentioned, it backfires, and I think it actually kind of ruins trust versus not. But I mean, those people get tons of engagement too, so maybe there's plenty of people that appreciate it. But I feel like it's a little bit of bait and switch in a way.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there that are just like real, like, especially now, they've been in the industry for, let's just say, 5-10 years, and they never used LinkedIn. And so they're like, oh shit, I need to hop on LinkedIn within the last 8
Yeah,
months. And they're doing anything they can, right? And props to them for jumping on and trying to learn from creators. And I think those are the people that are getting taken advantage of, right? They're seeing someone who's posting, oh, I did X, B, and C and all these different things, and I jumped through the hula hoop, and while I was making a cold call, right? And to me, it just seems like there has to be some level of trust and credibility, because if we continue to burn bridges with the people who are younger, who are actually trying to grow, those people aren't going to have any sort of skills when they go to get hired somewhere new, right? Or they're not going to hit their, they're going to be put on a PIP, right? Or they're spending half their check on a course that doesn't make any sense, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah. I think that's the problem. Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, I'm not calling anybody out, but I would love to ask you this. I mean, what's a way, and I know you kind of talked about this, but what's a way of talking about what you've done in the past, how you've helped companies grow, and as a team, that you could do on post on LinkedIn or talk about when you're at events, that doesn't make you seem like you're a narcissist, or right? Because I think that's really what we're getting to, right?
yeah. I mean, I think a quick reframe, like we talked about, is I didn't grow the company. Like, I was at the company from here to here. Like, this is what I learned. Here's my individual numbers, and things like that. But like taking credit for the whole company's revenue, like that's a bit much. But if you're talking about your own quota, your team's quota, like, hey, I led this team and it was at X%, quota or whatever, like that's good. And maybe you contributed to, 30% of the company's revenue growth, which would be absurd, but maybe it's possible. But even then, you're accounting for 70% of the revenue that you didn't have anything to do with. So I think it's just a quick reframe. And Yeah, I think it's the same with like the sales process too. Like that is a sales process. They're trying to get people to chat with them and buy their course or
Mhm.
I don't know, hire them, whatever it is. So
It's
I think it's all about building trust, and yeah, people aren't stupid. I think people value humility over like selfishness. So
yeah, and like for someone like yourself who's been in different companies as a founding AE, and I mean, the people who are going to be on the show, right? A lot of them have been there, done that. And so for them, it's like they could easily sniff out when someone's bullshitting, right? Or someone's taking responsibility for something that they know that there's just no way you could have done that all yourself, right?
yeah, and I mean we see posts all the time, even with like people making fun of like, oh, I spoke to the CEO of this X amount company, and now I feel like I see more roasting posts about that than
Yeah,
the actual posts. So if we keep fighting the good fight, maybe it'll get better.
exactly. And LinkedIn content will get better. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I think there's the great creators, the creators that are trying to lift others up, like a Jared Robin type of person. And there's also creators that are in it for themselves. And I don't think as a creator and as someone who's trying to build a brand, if you're in it for yourself, you can fake that for a little bit, right? You can, but the long range over 10-year span, it's going to be really hard to continue to fake it, right? Eventually it's just going to come out, and then you're gonna be a fraud, or in general, you're just not gonna be seen as a trustworthy person, and that could really hurt your personal credibility, which that ties to the company, and the company isn't gonna wanna hire someone who was seen as that, right? And so there's an easy equilibrium here when you're being playful, and I even realize now that the content that I'm putting out, it's starting to get seen more, and like I have the power to either share something that's going to actually be helpful and lift others up, or I have the ability to say, "Oh, I met with somebody, who I never met with," or just kind of bring up a fake story just to get a point across to make me seem smart, right? And
Yeah,
I'm
so
not saying I haven't done it. I've done like back in the day, I did one post like that, and I was like, "What the? Why did I?" And I've gone back and looked, like, "Why did I create that?" That is the like I got no engagement, no one cared,
yeah,
no
yeah.
one right? So I mean, I think we've all done it, and we're being harsh, but you got to stop.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, I've probably done it as well. And yeah, you look at old posts and you're like, damn, I should have done that. But yeah, people change. I think the way people want to see content changes as well. So maybe it was more popular back then. But yeah, I don't think anyone has any like intention to do it. And I think a lot of it probably fuels from like the really good years where tech was blowing up and there was like a lot of these stories. And then they were like, oh, I was super successful there. Like I could just do my own thing and then I'll just
Yeah.
use that as like my credibility crunch. But yeah, I think times are changing and people are getting more uh transparent with like, okay, well, what actually went on, and I don't know, does it make sense for me to pay $500 for a course because you got in at the right time and I don't really know how much you actually contributed versus didn't. So
How are you when you're hiring people? And I know you're currently hiring right now. So like when you have someone that submits a resume and let's say they do have some of those numbers in there and you're like, okay, this doesn't seem real. How do you approach that? Like how do you dig in the interview process?
yeah, I mean, I think individual numbers, especially interview, obviously, like you're selling yourself. So that's something that's, important. I have my numbers on LinkedIn for every interview. That's
Yeah.
probably the most important thing is like really having that track record. But at the same time, putting that in your headline, like I grew this company from X to X. I mean, I think that's like a bit more self-centered, I guess. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like when you're interviewing them,
Yeah, I think it's
would you even interview them?
yeah, I think it's important to like look at those numbers. I mean, that's one of the single most important things is like having those numbers. And then like obviously if you're interviewing correctly, like you should be back channeling and talking to people. And that's where we were talking about earlier. Like if you have that network, then back channeling is going to be easier. Is there someone within my network that knows them or worked with them in the past? And
Yeah.
I ask them and they say, yeah, he's great. He invited me to this podcast and sent me a bunch of sour candies and he's super nice and has all this, booked all these, top leaders. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, this checks out. But if they're like, you know, he was a good hire and I don't want to like get too much into it, then it's like, okay, well, it's not gonna I think.
Yeah,
So
exactly. They're hiding
I
something.
think back channeling, yeah, the numbers are good and then back channeling. Yeah, and I think there's it's a lot easier to back channel these days because you know where they were, you know who was there at the time. Even asking like other AEs that were there, like, hey, do these numbers sound accurate? So I think it's all about honesty. And if you lie on your numbers, like you're eventually probably going to get, called out on it. But I'm sure it happens all the time too. So
Of course. And there is like a data play there, right? Like you're collecting data before you make a decision on who to hire, right? And like that's the biggest signals to me is like if the people they worked with do they like the person? Do they have nice things to say? Or is it like, yeah, I like them, but, and then you hear the but and you're like, okay, what is that, right? And they're like a little shy about saying it. And I mean, sure, I think everyone's maybe had a bad relationship with somebody in the past, but overall the SaaS community is so small. There's not that many leaders. I mean, 10,000 to 20,000 leaders, and that's actually not that big, right? So you could actually be able to find, and people are on LinkedIn, they all know each other. So
yeah, exactly.
people are hiring, go on LinkedIn, reach out to the people at these. If you have a job opening, don't just take the interview and listen to people. You got to go and back check and make sure that where they worked at before, were they a part of the good culture, right? And so I love that, Nate. Let's go right into our sour take number 4. Now, this is the most sour candy that people have been saying, at least. I think the 5th one gets overshadowed because this one's a like big punch right away.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what you have to say.
Cool. Yeah, the
Sour
last
take
one.
number 4, Barnett's Mega Sour Candy.
Get it out.
I wrapped
Boom.
those pretty good. I'll cheers you
Oh,
on
you wrapped
this.
this. Okay. Cheers.
Sour take number 4, most product differentiators are not true
Ooh,
differentiators.
this one's hitting. I feel like if you put in your cheek, it's like cheating.
Yeah.
Like I can't talk, it's on my tongue.
Ooh.
It's good though.
Oh, I love it.
I think I'm sweating them.
It's sweeter as you go. Did you
That's
hear
good.
sour take number 4?
Yeah. Should probably talk about it, I guess. Yeah, so I think we're seeing this like a lot now. Obviously, like Clary, Gong, Outreach, Sales Loft. There's like this consolidation when things are getting like more and more commoditized. So it's not that these companies don't have real differentiators, just an example, but I think the best way to do well is making sure you have those concrete differences. So I know we all know companies that do this, but selling on low price or like, hey, we have a trial model so you can test it out. Or even if the UI is like clean, that's obviously important, but it's not like a sustainable path to differentiation. So, someone's always going to come in lower priced. It's kind of hard to talk like this. Or with a different motion or whatever it is. So like for us, like we're the only marketing analytics tool that you can like build your own reports in, or
Yeah.
that uses like cookieless tracking for the website. So these are like concrete differences that when you're talking to customers, like the main thing they want to know is how are you different than your alternatives.
Yeah.
So when you have these concrete product differences like that, you can almost like disqualify your own competition because you can ask them, or they mention like, hey, we need to build our own reports in the platform. Or we need, we're worried about cookie depreciation and we want to make sure the web tracking is, super modern. Then that already like, it doesn't matter what the cost of the other tools are, but if they don't do that, then you've already made the decision easier. And it's not you telling the prospect like, hey, you should use us because of these reasons. Well, you mentioned that you need this and we're the only one that can do that. So this is probably going to be like the best fit scenario. So yeah, I think a lot of teams, if they don't have that concrete differentiator, they're reaching for other things, but it's not a sustainable difference. You're going to win some deals if you have a lower price or, you have a free trial or whatever it is. But another company might come along and have a lower price point or whatever it is. So, you're always going to have to like keep an eye out of like, hey, what's the next path we're going to take if this doesn't work out? Someone
Yeah.
comes in cheaper, like, what are we going to do type thing. So I think just always having like the best product, or at least like taking a different approach where there's different features or functionality or like a vision you have that's different than others is super important, especially now where there's obviously like millions of different tools. So
Yeah. I know there's a saying where it's like, you can have the best marketing ever, and if the product sucks, it's still gonna suck, right? And I think that rings true always. And like what you just said to me, I've been at companies where we've struggled with what makes us different, right? And when you're struggling with that, you're relying on your marketing tactics, right? You're relying on having the best AE in the room who can schmooze these people into buying your product, right? Where it's like, instead, if you have a good product and you have these differences, those are what brings the most, like, right, that's what's going to drive the
Right.
decision more than anything. It's not the cool marketing materials or the UI, right? Of course that helps, but if you have differences in your tech, that's actually, and those differences are what your buyers want and need, that sets you up for success. Now you just need to get the word out that you have those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, the best move you can make as an AE is find a team with really good marketing and with the best product. It doesn't even need to be the best product out of the gate, but if they have the best team that ships the functionality the quickest and they have like the biggest vision of like where the space is going to go, then you're going to outpace your competition as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you're an AE, you want the easiest job possible, just find best marketing, best product, and then the rest is on you. But I don't know, it gives you unfair advantage for sure.
Of course, you can take that out too if you feel like it. Um, you know, I want to touch base on the whole, like, creating a product, and I think a lot of AEs, like, you hear this information from your buyers who are like, I need this, I need this, I need this. And instead of like writing those notes down and being like, oh, these are what our buyers actually want, let's go and make like a ticket to our product team to make that, and like maybe this is a actionable item. Is
Yeah,
there something there that you would like want to talk about, and how would you get that done?
yeah, I think I mean the best way is going to be customer feedback. Because you could trust them the most. They already bought the platform as is, and now they're making recommendations of what it's missing. They're
Yeah.
using the product. So I think that's the biggest advantage like a team could use for direction and differentiation is what do these people want that are already using the tool. And then I think one step below that, I guess, of importance would be what you're mentioning is like what are prospects mentioning. I think the challenge is you will get like a lot of noise and you might get a lot of requests for something, but so, for example, like we might get a request for, hey, you should build this specific integration, and 4 or 5 people request it in the same month, and I tell the product team like, hey, we should build it because I'll be able to close this business. They build it, and then no one closes because if they're using that tool, maybe they're a bad fit account. Like
Yeah.
it's a cheap CRM, they're not even willing to invest in tech. Like why would they buy one of the more premium marketing analytics tools? They're going to find like the cheapest one. So I think that's the challenge is like finding the noise, and with customers you kind of erase most of that noise because they already committed to you in the product and they believe in the team typically and that type of thing. So I think just making sure you have a strong relationship with them as well. And then what we talked about like earlier in the call too is just before you even build the product, like our founders did hundreds of interviews with different marketing people to understand like what the biggest problem was. And then they didn't just go ahead and like build a quick UI and like take a front end. Like they actually took several years to build the back end and make sure like the data integrations were strong and like everything was going to work correctly to solve for the issues that are coming about. So I think you just have to nonstop be getting feedback, but it's more so how do you use the feedback and make sure you're focused on things that are actually going to move the needle versus uh, maybe just like signs of something that's not actually going to do anything for you. So
Have you had any pushback on something that you've been like, hey, we need to get this done, and they're like, I don't know if we need that done right now?
yeah, and I think it's honestly a good thing because that's how I like learn this is you
Yeah.
know hey, if it's a big enough account and they need it and there's a timeline, like yeah, we can talk about it, but like they also should be checking you because there's 100 different things they can do. So unless you have a damn good reason that they should be taking away from 100 other things to build this, I think that's like an important thing to do. Um, but yeah, I mean at the same time, like there's teams that completely overlook it and it's like really hard to convince them even though it's pretty obvious it's going to be a big thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a challenge and a balance of figuring
Yeah.
out what's going to actually have the impact, what's going to drive the needle. And for us, yeah, I mean we're full, like our product roadmap is almost fully just what customers tell us they want and they need and things like that. So
Yeah.
and then if someone's willing to commit, we could build it in contingent of the contract being signed or something like that. But we don't want to dedicate a ton of resources up front if we don't know if it's actually going to, turn into revenue for us. So
That's a smart, that's kind of a smart tactic too. Like, hey, like we will build this integration if you commit, right? Like that, you can
yeah,
use that
exactly.
in your sale.
Yeah, and then you just build it in the onboarding process. So for us, it might take like 2 weeks to build integration. So, rather than a 2 to 3 week implementation, it's going to take a month and a half. But if you really want it and you're actually going to move forward, then, this would make sense versus just not doing anything. So
Yeah.
I think it makes sure they have skin in the game as well. And then, okay, well, we can dedicate resources because you all are saying, you're putting pen to paper and saying, hey, we're going to move forward if you have this. So
What's as the go-to-market leader, like, are there any pains that come with that title when you're working for a company that has such publicity like you guys do right now?
what do you mean?
Growth pains, like you guys are growing exponentially. I mean, you're barely doing any outbound right now just because of how much inbound you're getting. What are some of those challenges that you're seeing with that type of model and just being able to juggle everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing is we came up on like attribution basically, and that was really like what we're focused on.
Yeah.
And that got us to the point we are now. So I think what's challenging is having to like rethink about how you're doing things currently and not maximizing what you're doing now, but like, okay, well, if we want to grow 10x, like what type of company would we have to be to do that? And then taking actions to like do so. So I think that's like the biggest challenge is like what got us to here. LinkedIn social, a lot of like that type of stuff is probably not going to also like 10x us. So I think it's just figuring out like try to sit down and think strategically like, okay, well, it got us to this stage. So to get from this stage to another stage, we're gonna have to do completely different things. And I think that's just something you have to be like aware and cognizant of. But I don't think that was a super black and white answer or anything. But
No, I like
yeah,
that
things
answer.
change.
It
You have
gives
to be nimble, I
insight
think.
into like how you're thinking about growing. And I think there are companies and I know a lot of times I remember maybe 6 months ago, someone posted, it's like, why are CROs like the turn like the tenure so small? Because they'll grow. There's CROs that are very specialized on growing companies from
Right.
0 to 10 million, and then there's companies that are CROs that are specialized in growing 10 million to 100 million, right? And it kind of goes up by there. So I could see how that would be a problem or some sort of a thing that you're looking at right now, right? And how you're growing. So I think that's extremely valuable for our listeners who maybe are on the curve of like, okay, we're at 10 million. We need to think of some new ways. We can't just put more fuel on LinkedIn and expect to grow more, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like for us, like we got big on pitching attribution and like posting on LinkedIn, but now it's like, okay, well, if we can provide like more data back stuff like the HockeyStack labs and stuff like that we're talking about, and if we can expand out to like full go-to-market analytics versus just marketing attribution,
Yeah.
like that's the kind of like examples that we're thinking of is how do we broaden the vision and make this like a bigger thing than just what initially we came up on.
I love it. I love it. That brings us to our sour take number 5. Now, I'm going to allow you to spit that out. You made
That was
it
good though
through.
at the end.
How was that one? Did you like it?
Yeah, it was really good. It was hard to talk with, but and then once the coating's off, it's just sweet. So it's pretty
Yeah,
good.
then it's sweet. No big deal. We'll go into our toxic waste, nuclear fusion.
What flavor you got?
I think we all have the same here. I have pineapple, passion fruit.
Oh no, I got orange apple.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we have different ones here. I have pineapple. All right.
Have you been eating the same one every episode?
I have. Yeah, I've been
Oh wow.
eating the different. There's a couple different types, but yeah,
Okay.
all the same candies. The next 25,
Same
we're gonna
pain.
have one extra sour candy compared to, like I'm gonna swap out the sour Skittles for a sour candy. So that's a little
Sourer
mix.
than this?
No, it's gonna
Oh,
be
okay, gotcha.
Warheads. So it'll be like the third most sour candy then.
Nice.
All right. Sour take number 5. Using tactics and methodologies to try and close someone isn't the best way to win business. Now, for me, I'm I am someone who loves like, let's get in the room, let's talk about how we're gonna close somebody. And like, so when I read this, I was like, I had to take a step back. I'm like, he's totally right. If you're talking about someone like they're just a number, then it's much harder to win that business, right? So taking that
Yeah, I
step
think
definitely allowed me to kind of put my point of view and realize that you need to be treating people like they're people. With that being said,
yeah,
what are your takes on this?
yeah. I mean, I think to your point, there's nothing wrong with that. Like getting in a room with your team and saying, "Here's a high priority deal. Like, what steps can we take to like move this along?" I feel like the term like closing someone using like these tactics and methodologies, it's almost like I feel like the way we talk about it is like manipulating them. Like I made
Yeah.
them like make this decision that they didn't want to make because I'm so good at sales. I think like prospects are very smart and educated, especially even more so now with having access to everything like before they even talk to you. So it almost goes back to like I think what we were talking about earlier, where like with the we group, company X to X, like it actually is counteractive in that it almost like gets rid of trust versus actually builds it. So an example of this like we all see is like never split the difference. Like there was a time where that book worked and you could like use a lot of this stuff, and obviously you still can. But I think a lot of it lost authenticity because like every SDR, rather than asking like, "Hey, do you want to book a meeting?" they would say, "Is it absolutely ridiculous to put some time on the calendar?" Because it teaches you to like try to get to a no answer. So everyone starts asking these weird questions that's like you never asked that in person. It's so weird. Or like mirroring. So if someone says like, "I'm tired today." Oh, you're tired? Like, yeah, no shit. I just said that. So I think like it kind of undermines, like underestimates the prospects. Like they can recognize that, I think, and you immediately lose trust and credibility. And obviously that's for us, we're selling to people that are very like in the same circles and like having known what that book are and stuff like that. So maybe different industries, but I
Yeah.
think the best way to like actually close someone or bring in revenue is more about like building trust. So like being honest throughout the sales cycle, like being authentic, being comfortable to talk to. So I think even with that, like you're going to get a lot more information. So it's indirectly going to help you because they're going to be more happy to like share information within discovery. And then you can actually use that to tailor a better demo and talk to their pain points. So I think there's like a down funnel effect of that. And then obviously like being a market expert, being able to highlight like why this would or wouldn't be a good fit versus alternatives. And I think just like being responsive and like providing the info they need to come up like with their own decision. So I don't think it's like our job to manipulate or like change someone's
Yeah.
mind. And if you listen to like what their needs are and present the information in a way that's like easy to understand, it's relevant, and it's truly like the best solution for them, then the prospect's going to come up with the decision themselves, and then it's easier, for everyone, I think. So
How are
yeah,
you
I think
building? How are you building that trust? You know, there's a lot of ways to build the trust, but from your point of view, what are the best ways to do that?
yeah, I think it's just trying to just being normal, like having a normal conversation with someone like you would normally. Like I feel like people really like overcomplicate this. Like when we interview all our customers after they buy, we ask them for feedback on the sales process. And all the positive stuff is like, we didn't feel pressure to buy. Like we were presenting the information and they allowed us to make the decision. Like you gave us space and that really stood out against competition. Um, Sales didn't seem to even care if we bought or not. Like they gave us the information we need to make a decision, put it all out there and let us make the call. So I think just like not being pushy, being normal, being approachable, and then just being honest too is like, if you're looking at 3 different tools, like this tool will be better if you're thinking about it this way. This one would be better if this way. For us, like this is our approach. And if you're doing X, Y, Z, like we would be a better fit. So I think just like having that level of like transparency, and people naturally know, they judge you immediately, but I think like people have a pretty good idea if you're putting on a show or something like that initially.
Yeah.
Because a lot of reps are going to have commission breath and they're going to be like pressured from above, like, oh, my manager, I have to close this deal or it's going to go really bad. So I think it forces like unnatural conversations. And then, yeah, prospects know that, from the get go. and we see this all the time. Like most people say most demos suck and like they're really bad and they're a waste of time. So I think just like the bar is like really low. And I think just like being normal and having these normal conversations and just being like, I don't know, a good person providing a good experience, like start to finish,
Yeah.
is the best way to do it. And obviously, like there's different things you can say and ways to say it, to get, to help like move things along. But I think it's less about like this tactic or methodology and, more about just being transparent, giving them the information they need in a format that makes sense, is easy to understand, applies to them. And then if you did your job right throughout the whole engagement, then, it should be a clear fit if it's a decision or not, assuming it is, which that goes back to like try to work in the best product, because then,
Yep.
you'll be able to know, versus that's where you run into issues with like, oh, well, we only have the cheapest price. Well, then you're leaving it on the line, I think. So maybe that's just for me personally, is that if you're in that situation where you are like the strongest product and you're selling on value, then it's a lot easier to just leave it all out there and be like, hey, this is what you get. There's cheaper alternatives. Here's what you'll be missing out. If you want to go that route, that's fine. But there's a reason that, companies pay the extra dollar for this type of tool. So
Yeah, it's a good point to bring up. Like, just talk to people like normal people. Like, whenever I'm on LinkedIn or even sending an email or on a phone call, right? My first, when LinkedIn, you meet new people, you're gonna hop on a call. I always think about, like, if I was face to face with them, if I was sitting down at a coffee shop, what would I say? How would I say it? I'm definitely not gonna say like, looking forward to meeting you, this and that. Like, I like this whole little spiel, the ending that they always like to throw in there, like, hey, how's your day going? This and it's just like kind of a bunch of filler. So for
yeah,
me, my favorite technique is always thinking like, okay, if I met this person right now at an event, how would I talk to them? And that's keep it that short and quick. And also going to your point about the product demo, when you're in a demo, I see companies all the time that are like, here's a script that you can use for this demo. Learn the script, read it by script. And I think
slides.
that, and I think there's a lot of people now that can see through that script, right? And it doesn't feel like you. So, do you guys have a script? Like, and if you don't, cool. Like, how do you get your team and how do you deliver a demo that actually stands out versus just like, hey, we're here, let me show you the product, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think to like elaborate on your point too, like I think a different way to think about it is not just like how would I talk to them in a coffee shop, but also like how would I feel if I was getting this pitch for myself, basically. So if you say something, you're like, ooh, that's kind of like cringy, then
Yeah.
like obviously the prospects, yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm not about this. So I think that's a good way to think about it. And then also just like take demos. Like take a demo with something and check it out and like see what the experience to you is. And like figure out like, hey, what landed, what didn't. Here's something they did really well, but the way they approached it or the intro is really bad. So you kind of like learn from it that way. As far as the script, I mean, I think at least the script, just like some type of outline is going to be like necessary to get started. But I think it's all about like ramping. So the faster you can get up to speed and actually know what you're talking about versus having to like refer to a script because there's still like information gaps.
Yeah.
That's going to be like the best situation. So for us, like I was really lucky in that we had a lot of inbound traffic when I started. So I was getting like hammered with calls all day. So I was able to ramp really quickly. So yeah, that first, 1, 2 months, whatever it is, there's probably like a lot of subpar demos. They're all saying things I wasn't uncomfortable with. But once you get to a point where you've had enough at bats, you've talked to enough leaders, you know what you're solving for, you know how you're different than alternatives. You're confident in the price point because you've seen, other people pay that much and understand the value and that type of thing. Then it becomes obviously a lot easier because you don't have to worry about like, what am I going to say next, or what's left on this next on the script, or like which discovery question did I not ask? You kind of are able to just go through it, naturally, and that's going to be the best scenario for I think all the situations or all the examples we're mentioning right now is you're going to come off a lot more comfortable. So those initial demos, I probably came off sketch or I didn't know what I was talking about or like I was following the script, but I think that's just part of what it is when you start until you get to that point
Yeah.
of comfort. And then now, I mean, people probably think I don't prep at all because I'm just,
Yeah.
just kind of more
Jumping on.
casual with it, which, isn't probably a good thing, but I think they appreciate like the more casual conversation versus, here's my 10 discovery calls and then here's the demo. And you can also I think what's important is you can make pivots within the call. So if they tell you something in the initial call and you're going by a script, you're just going to basically ignore what they're saying. But if they have one or two really important things, then that's what you should focus on, and everything else should be, very minor within the demo. So being able to like pivot on the fly, I think is important too. And you can only do that obviously once you're comfortable and actually know what you're talking about, which, just comes with onboarding.
As a founding AE, and I'm gonna dive now that we're away from our sour takes, so we made it through, but I would love to kind
Nice.
of talk about like your unique position, because I don't think everybody has been a founding AE, or maybe there are people who have been AEs at like a Gong or a big company at Outreach, and they're like, okay, I'm going to that smaller company, I'm gonna be the founding AE. What are some tips there that you could give people who are looking to do that or are in the position currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely have to have like a certain mindset for that.
Okay.
Um, you have to really like want to build from scratch and know there's no proven method and no playbook, and you're gonna have to go in and kind of figure all that stuff out. So I think there's definitely like a certain personality trait where you need to be higher risk and like willing to put in additional hours and willing to like, we figure this out, or the company makes no sales, because if you're the only AE, then everything's funneling through you. So
Yeah.
I think there's just you have to want that.
Yeah.
Because if you're just doing it for the title, or, I want to grow really quick, like it's going to get exposed like pretty quick. But there's so many advantages to it, because like even what I just mentioned, where I had all these calls back to back, like if you joined a really big company, you would have, 2 or 3 month ramp, and maybe you have like 4 calls a week or something like that. And it's going to take you like a really long time to get to like a really good point. Whereas if you're getting like a lot of at bats and moving quickly and learning fast and like messing up a lot and learning from those mistakes and all that continuously, it's going to compound over time, and you're going to be a lot further than you would be, at a bigger org. And same
Yeah.
with career wise. Like obviously, if you start as a founding AE, you're going to have a lot more upside to get promoted into like leadership or something like that, versus if you're one of 50 AEs at Gong or something like that. So I think it's like the best learning atmosphere you can get into is a startup. And I have like an MBA. And I feel like this working at these early stage startups, I'm learning 1,000 times more than I ever did in like a classroom. So as far as like advice, I mean, I think it's just kind of like the grit and knowing what you're getting into, and like making sure you're taking steps to like succeed there, because especially if you're coming off like a role where there is an established playbook and established motion and we know it works, you have to go in knowing, hey, there might be expectations that are either unrealistic, there might be no expectations, but like no matter what, you got to figure out, a way to make it work. So I think it takes like a level of ambition and experience, I guess, to be successful there. So
Do you lean on anybody in when you do join a company? You've been at 3. Are there people that you've reached out to and been like, hey, I'm trying to create something here, I'm the new AE, like a mentor or something like that?
yeah, I mean, I keep in touch. Like Chili Piper was the first company I did that at. So I keep in touch with like a lot of the core group, because everyone is doing in a similar position, but like in different departments.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them went on to do something similar in other companies. So they have experience where they built something, twice. I think the challenge is like a lot of what worked previously. Like we talked about this already, but
Yeah.
you have to like consistently change what you're doing. So the experience doesn't always help, but it's good to like have what you're saying is like a group of people that you can bounce ideas off and like
Of course.
understand what's happening. Because like outbound at Chili Piper, was way different than like what we're gonna have to do now. But I still talk to people that we did a strategy at Chili Piper for outbound that was really successful that probably wouldn't work now. But understand, okay, well, how have you all pivoted? What have you tried? And that type of thing as well. And then there's actually like a Slack community for founding AEs, but I think we're all probably so busy that it's hard to actually like engage with that. But yeah, I think you have to obviously be prepared for the workload. And it's hard to like disappear because there's no one, covering
There's
your
nobody
shift and stuff
there.
like that. So yeah,
I
exactly. So if you
I've had a similar experience when I was at my at Ascent. Like when I came on, I began as just getting people to attend the event, and it quickly, you get more experience. You've been like, I started doing sponsorship sales, right? And you're doing the sales, and then you're figuring out, okay, how do we build something up here? And I ended up, hiring 4 to 6 different AEs, SGRs in between. And to me, it was just like, okay, for the first 2 years, I really loved building that process out. But after the time came, it was like, okay, we need to actually figure out a way that I could go on vacation, right? Or go and take some time
Yeah,
off,
yeah.
right? To actually, like, because I'm not, I know if I'm doing 80 hours of work, I'm not going to be being able to make the best decisions possible. It's just, it's not, you're not capable of, right? After a long
Right.
time. So, is there advice there that you give to these founding AEs or even founders, right, who are working all these hours and maybe they're like, okay, I could do this forever. Like, is there advice there to be able to actually stand this up and grow it into something where it's like, okay, now we have a process, we have something that's built, we have a team underneath us, and you're able to actually go take some time and make more strategic decisions because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning it's just all hands on deck, max
Of
out what you
course.
can do, you know what you're getting into type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, over time, I think ideally you try to build something scalable and repeatable, and you've already like ironed out a lot of like, the playbooks or whatever you want to call them, or like your process and things like that, till it gets to a point where, you know, you can disappear for a couple of days and reset. But I
Yeah.
think it's not like for me, I like to just work a lot consistently, like for multiple days, and then I'll
Yeah.
get to a point where I'm like, my brain doesn't work. And then I think just making sure you can communicate that with the rest of the team and be like, this is how I work best, where other people, they want to do a 9 to 5 or, whatever
Yep.
longer time as well, but they have their nights themselves, they're not going to work early, that type of thing. For me, like I can go all out, but eventually I'm going to hit a wall. And so that's what works for me specifically. So I think it's just figuring out like how you like to work and communicating that, and then just making sure like the team's there to support as well. Cause like you said, like, there's no like, oh, you're slacking because you need to take off. It's like you need like some time to reset. So
Yeah.
just making sure like leadership understands that and knows it's for production as well, because like you said, you're going to be able to make better decisions and be more productive and that type of thing,
Yeah.
than if you're just nonstop. But
How do you keep that work-life balance?
yeah, I think it can be tough.
Yeah.
I think for me specifically, like I mentioned, I'll do a lot in a short burst, but then I'll make sure to like take some time and do something fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I have a 2-year-old, I have another kid on the way, I have a wife, so obviously like family is really big for me, but also like having my own friends and relationships and like taking care of myself and making sure I'm like cooking healthy meals and not just like ordering takeout every night because I'm working too much and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of practice, and each company's like a bit different, but ultimately I think you have to know that coming in, otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. So I think just figuring out ways to like carve out time, and I think it's especially hard in sales because our calendar is dictated by when meetings get booked on the calendar. So it's not like we can do strict time blocks all the time, but I think just making sure like, you know, I want to prioritize doing, these 5 or 10 things per day, like, and making sure you actually like stick to it. So work to a certain point, but making sure, hey, I'm going to the gym or I'm taking care of myself or I'm taking out my family, that type of thing. So, um, yeah, I think just kind of doing like a life and a life audit, understanding like what your goals are. And then you can also start phasing out things that aren't super important. So obviously once I have my son, like going out and watching football, at the bar on Sunday or something, like that's something I could deprioritize to make sure, I
Yeah.
have additional time to actually do the stuff that's important. So.
Yeah. I love it. I think this is a great way to wrap up the show. I love doing like an overall takeaway. If there was something that, for the viewers who are watching, is there something that you would want them to take away from this episode? What would it be?
It's a good question. Um, I think I feel like my favorite quote of the show is just be normal. So I think like in everything that you're doing, just do it as you normally would in a normal situation, and how you would want to like perceive it as well. So, like for sales, for example, just do what you would actually want to receive on a demo versus going through a script or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of like overthinking and oh, I need to do this and I need to do this, but I think it's a lot simpler than people put out. So.
Yeah. Yeah, we create these playbooks, we create all of these different measurements, and it's easy to get over the top with things, right? But when you just stay simple, be who you are, because there's a reason why you were put in this position, because it's who you are. It's your personality that got you to be to where you're at. So lean into that, and just be normal, right?
There you go. Yeah, I
Thank you
think
so
people,
much. Thank you so
it's
much
hard. It's just
for
like the
joining.
foundation of the basics, So
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, man.
For anyone who's watching, you can follow Nate on LinkedIn. You can follow the HockeyStack team. They're all posting. They have their own media site now, media channel on their website. So make sure to go check that out. HockeyStack is a sponsor of this podcast / series. So I just want to give them a shout out as well. Thank you guys for supporting Nate. And it's been amazing getting to know everyone there. For people who are wondering how to find the podcast, you can go to our website, Sour Go-to-Market SaaS Takes website. You can go to our homepage. You can go to, we're going to be posting on TikTok soon. So we're releasing in all different channels. And if you want to connect with me personally, please do. I'm here to lift others up. And if you want to join the show, season 2, all you have to do is shoot me a DM and we can add you.
Wait in line for 100 other people.
Yeah, right. All right. See you guys.
Well,
Thanks for listening to the Sour Go-to-Market SaaS Takes podcast, sponsored by Sales Intel, TAC, The Juice, Rev Genius, and HockeyStack. More bite-sized content is available on our LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.